my dear, we make quite a duo with these regular visits, don't we? I know you feel like I'm talking directly to you and it's just the two of us. I like twosomes. As an introvert, my happiness is inversely proportional to the size of the group. I've never understood what people mean when they say, the more the merrier. For an introvert, it's the more the drearier. At big parties, I'm always off in a corner trying to have one productive intellectual conversation with just one other person. So I sort of turn the crowded room into a duo. This is video number 337, and the topic is HRT dosages for preventing endometrial uterine cancer. And it has a lot to do with duos. The reason I've started off by mentioning duos is because the subject of HRT dosage for preventing endometrial uterine cancer involves a duo between estrogen and progestogen. It is not about either hormone in isolation. Last week in video 336, I discussed the HRT regimens for preventing endometrial uterine cancer. And dosages depend on the regimen also. So let's make sure you understand these dynamics between estrogen and progestogen, and between a cyclic regimen and a continuous regimen. As you know, this video builds on the last. My entire menopause education works that way. So, chapter 31 is the endometrial uterine cancer chapter in my book, in both the first edition and the second edition. So if you're using the book to follow along, that's where you'll find today's material, albeit not in as great detail as I give you here. So way back in videos 80 to 90, you learned about something called the estrogen window of opportunity. And you discovered that it pertains to starting estrogen early in your postmenopause so that you bridge the gap between losing your own estrogen and replacing estrogen. And by doing that, you prevent the diseases that are due to estrogen deficiency, which include heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. But you also learned that there are specific minimal dosage requirements in order to accomplish the goal of preventing these diseases. And you know, sometimes women ask for a study that cites those dosages. It's as if they have to rely on at least one study to believe that the minimal dosages for preventing these diseases are valid. Of course, much of this comes from fear of HRT. And much of it comes from having heard the ridiculous mantra of take the lowest dosage for the shortest time. So I want to first tell you how the designation of the minimal necessary dosages for disease prevention came about. Because the fact is that these dosage requirements were established decades ago, back when it was routine to give all women HRT at the time of menopause. Between the mid-1900s and 2002, when the WHI misreported its findings, there was not a vast array of options for estrogen replacement. Back then, there was only one product for estrogen replacement, and it was Premarin. And that's because Premarin was the first estrogen product ever made for menopause. And it came in multiple different dosages. Bunches of different dosages. Well, Premarin is conjugated estrogens. That means it's a mixture of estrogens. For decades, it was established that the minimal necessary dosage of Premarin for preventing heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's was 0.625 milligrams of Premarin. This was discovered because women who took dosages lower than that ended up having heart attacks, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. Whereas women who took at least 0.625 milligrams did not. Many women took doses much higher than that. Remember, the cited dosages are minimal, not maximal, nor are they the right dosage for all women. Get that kind of thinking out of your head. There is nothing that is right for all women. The cited minimal dosages are merely the lowest dosages you can take if you wish to prevent heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's with your HRT. Since the days when Premarin was the only estrogen replacement product, many other estrogen formulations have been developed. Now there are other pills, patches, gels, vaginal rings. And they are made with all sorts of different kinds of estrogen instead of all being conjugated estrogens like Premarin. But the minimal necessary dosages for each of these newer products has been determined by comparing each one to the dosage of 0.625 milligrams of Premarin. So now we know the minimal necessary dosage for each different kind of estrogen. And the reason you don't need a study citing these dosages is because nothing has changed. This information has been solid for decades. What has changed is fear of HRT. And the only reason anyone has ever questioned the minimal necessary dosage is fear. Fear is the very reason anyone even thinks about taking the lowest minimal dosage, or the lowest possible dosage. There is no other hormone deficiency for which there is such focus on taking the lowest dosage. For all other hormone deficiencies, you just take whatever dosage is appropriate for your situation, and that makes a whole lot more sense. And in the case of estrogen replacement, the dosage has to be adequate and sufficient to protect your heart, bone, and brain from heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's, respectively. So the estrogen window is all about your heart, bone, and brain. It has nothing at all to do with your uterus. So that's where this concept of a duo comes in. You have to separate estrogen and progestogen. They have completely different job descriptions. So you have to separate their actions for purposes of meeting your menopause goals. Estrogen prevents the diseases of estrogen deficiency and alleviates all your symptoms of menopause. Progestogen protects your uterus from endometrial uterine cancer. Those are pretty significantly different job descriptions. If you want to protect your uterus from endometrial uterine cancer, you have to take progestogen with your estrogen. They become a duo. And that's where both regimen and progesterone dosage come into play. In keeping with the idea that estrogen and progestogen have different job descriptions, you have to realize that estrogen is the boss. Mama bear represents estrogen. She's the boss. And progestogen has to follow the boss's orders. So progestogen is like the employee. The employee has to work for the boss. So what you end up with is a dosage of estrogen that is dictated by its ability to prevent heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's, accompanied by a dosage of progestogen that can protect your uterus against that dosage of estrogen. Likewise, with regard to regimen, estrogen is the boss, and progestogen is the employee. However you take your estrogen, your progestogen has to compensate for it with regard to protecting your uterus. So you can think of estrogen as the boss and progestogen as the employee that guards your uterus. The key is to prioritize them correctly. You are mama bear. Your hormone is estrogen. So estrogen runs the show. Progestogen is merely along for the ride. It piggybacks estrogen. This dynamic is no different than it's ever been. That's why I like to use these props of Mama Bear and Baby Bear. Mama Bear has always been Baby Bear's boss. Don't ever confuse which one is the most important for you. It's estrogen. So this is how we end up with the concept of estrogen, progestogen balance. You have to take a dosage of progestogen that balances your dosage of estrogen with regard to your uterus. And this balance is not as simple as a standard ratio. Many women have this misconception that there should be a 3-to-1 or 2-to-1 ratio between estrogen and progesterone, or progesterone and estrogen, or whatever. That is not the case. That's impossible given the fact that estrogens and progestogens come in all sorts of different products with all sorts of different estrogen and progestogen ingredients, different absorption rates, different delivery systems, different molecular sizes, etc., etc. So it's much more complicated than just a simple ratio. Instead, for each and every kind of estrogen, there is a designated dosage of each and every kind of progestogen to balance it. And for each and every delivery system for estrogen, there is a designated dosage of each and every kind of progestogen to balance it. On a number of occasions, I've shown you a list of different kinds of estrogen along with their minimal necessary dosages for preventing heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. Here it is again. This chart shows you the list of different kinds of estrogens in the left column and the minimal necessary dosage of each for preventing the diseases due to estrogen deficiency in the right column. Do not assume that this is a list of the dosage you should take or even try to take. It is not the right dosage or the best dosage or the maximal dosage for you. It has nothing to do with you. It's a list of the lowest dosages that can prevent heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's in the vast majority of women. You should assume that if you ever take a dosage lower than the ones listed here for each type of estrogen, then you will not be doing anything with your HRT to prevent heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's. Notice that the last three items at the bottom consist of compounded forms of estrogen, and they include compounded bi-est pills or creams, compounded tri-est pills or creams, and compounded bioidentical pellets. Next to each, I've indicated that none is reliable for purposes of preventing heart attack, osteoporosis, or Alzheimer's. And that's because the compounding industry is entirely unregulated. So you never know what you're getting or how much you're getting with any compounded product. And you just can't entrust your heart, bones, and brain to such uncertainty. But when it comes to your endometrial uterine lining, estrogen is the enemy, not the hero. So compounded estrogen products may be less prone to causing endometrial uterine cancer. And if that's all you care about in terms of accomplishments with your HRT, it may be just fine to use them. In other words, your uterus is not worse off with compounded estrogens, but your heart, bone, and brain are. So if you don't care about protecting your heart, bones, and brain from heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's with your HRT, then you might feel fine about using compounded products. So now let's shift our attention to progestogen. How do you know what dosage of progestogen to take? Well, there is also a long list of all the different kinds of progestogens, but the dosages designated for them are the standard dosages that will balance the estrogen dosages. Remember, they are the boss's employee. And the dosages listed for progestogens depend entirely on the dosage listed for estrogen. Again, Mama Bear is the boss. And the progestogen dosages also vary depending on whether the regimen that you use is cyclic or continuous. So here's a list of the different kinds of progestogens and the standard dosages that will balance the dosages of estrogens in the previous list. In the first column, you see the list of the different kinds of progestogens. In the second column, you see the standard dosage needed to balance the minimal necessary dosage of estrogen if you're on a continuous regimen. On a continuous regimen, you take the progestogen with the estrogen every day. The only exception is progesterone gel, which hangs around in your system longer, enabling you to apply it just twice weekly. In the third column, you see the standard dosage needed to balance the minimal necessary dosage of estrogen if you're on a cyclic regimen. And notice that patches do not have a dosage listed for the cyclic regimen. And that's because there are no progesterone-only patches or progestogen-only patches. All the patches that contain progestogen contain estrogen also. So they're automatically a continuous regimen. So you're left with mostly progestogen pills that you can put in either your mouth or your vagina. And notice that generally speaking, the progestogen pill dosage on a cyclic regimen is twice the dosage on a continuous regimen. And again, the exception is the progesterone gel, which is every other day for 12 days each month. Notice that there is no distinction indicated with regard to the reliability of compounded progesterone versus pharmaceutical progestogens. Nor is there a distinction noted between bioidentical progesterone versus non-bioidentical progestogens. And that's because all these progestogens are well suited to perform the role of the progestogen component in either the cyclic or the continuous regimen. However, when it comes to your endometrial lining specifically, there are some differences. It turns out that synthetic progestins do a better job than compounded progesterones or bioidentical progesterones at preventing buildup of your endometrial uterine lining. So as much as you may want bioidentical or compounded hormones to be better than synthetic hormones, this is one area where they aren't. As far as your uterus is concerned, synthetic progestins are better. Now, what if your only goal is to prevent endometrial uterine cancer and you are not intent on preventing heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's? Well, in that case, you still have to balance your estrogen and progestogen, and Mama Bear is still the boss. But you can take a lower dosage of estrogen than the ones listed in the estrogen chart. They may suffice for symptom relief, but not disease prevention. And you can find the charts by clicking the link in the description box for this video or by going to menopausetailor.me as usual. Notice that I used the term standard progestogen dosage throughout this tutorial. And that's because women are not robots. These dosage combinations work for most women, but you are not most women. You are you. And sometimes the combination listed isn't right for you. This is where the tweaking comes in. And if the dosage combination isn't right for you, you'll bleed when you shouldn't bleed. There's a special name for bleeding when you shouldn't bleed on HRT. It's called breakthrough bleeding. Breakthrough bleeding is when you bleed at the wrong time on a cyclic regimen, or you bleed at all on a continuous regimen. And if that happens, you do what I detailed in video 327. You get an evaluation that includes a pelvic ultrasound to determine the thickness of your endometrial lining, and an endometrial sampling to assess the cells of your inner uterine lining under a microscope. Most of the time, they're both completely normal. And all you have to do is adjust the balance of your estrogen and progesterone, the duo. This is the kind of thing I do with women in consultations all the time. The breakthrough bleeding just means that the standard HRT dosage combination of estrogen and progestogen is just not right for you. It's the same thing that's true when you're using birth control. Breakthrough bleeding just means that your particular birth control product is not the perfect balance for you. It's always about the duo. So what you've learned today is that there is a minimal necessary dosage of estrogen for preventing the diseases due to estrogen deficiency. And there is a minimal necessary dosage of progestogen necessary to balance that dosage of estrogen. If your goal is to prevent heart attack, osteoporosis, and Alzheimer's, take a dosage of estrogen that is capable of accomplishing that, and then take a dosage of progestogen that balances it. If your only goal is to prevent endometrial uterine cancer, you can take a lower dosage of estrogen, lower than the minimal necessary dosages for preventing diseases. But you still have to take a dosage of progestogen to balance it. No matter what, your progestogen dosage is dependent entirely on your estrogen dosage. Estrogen is the boss, whereas progestogen is the employee. The progestogen just serves the needs of estrogen. So ironically, even though progestogen is the hormone that prevents endometrial uterine cancer, your dosage of progestogen is dictated by your dosage of estrogen. This is the key behind progestogen dosage for preventing endometrial uterine cancer. So there you have it, my duo dears. I thoroughly enjoy your partnership. Please subscribe to this channel and to my newsletter if you haven't already. Then you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and Instagram. And go to menopausetailor.me if you want me all to yourself. I will help you with anything. Next week, we'll surge forward with mechanical options for preventing endometrial uterine cancer. See you then. Bye.